Members, it looks like we are scraping on the bottom of a quorum. $33 at the moment. So we're going to do some, as you know, at 2 o'clock, the chief executive had some bill signings at the request of members. They happen to all be House bills. So we're going to give our colleagues a little grace to see some bills that they put forth signed. So we might do a little business, and we might have to stand at ease for about 15 minutes or so. Messages from the Senate before we continue with third reading. Messages from the Senate.
Message 268. Mr. Speaker, the Senate did concur on House amendments to the bill listed below by the vote indicated. Senate File 38, monthly ad valorem tax revisions. Ayes 24, noes 5, excused 1. Message 269. Mr. Speaker, Senate File 47, carbon storage and sequestration liability. The Senate failed to concur on House amendments to the bill listed above by the vote indicated. Ayes 4, noes 25, excused 1. Message 270. Mr. Speaker, the Senate appointed Senate conferees to meet with a like committee number 1 from the House on amendments to Senate File 47. The Senate conferees are Senator Anderson, Chairman, Senator Perkins, Senator Rothfuss. Message 271. Mr. Speaker, the Senate did concur on House amendments to the bill listed below by the vote indicated. Senate File 27, dissolution of county boards authority. Ayes 25, noes 4, excused 1. Message 272. Mr. Speaker, Senate File 35, electric vehicle charging stations, regulation exemption. The Senate adopted the Joint Conference Committee number 1 report on the bill listed above by the vote indicated. Ayes 26, noes 2, excused 2. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
All right, thank you very much, members. We had a request for conferees, message 270 on Senate File 47. So the conference is Burkhart, Chairman, Roscoe, Stiff. Burkhart, Chairman, Roscoe, Stiff. Senate File 47. All right, so members, the chief executive is going to do bill signings for House Bill 43, 16, 81, and 82 in that order. They said it wasn't going to take very long, so the House is going to stand at ease, and we'll try to reconvene at 2:30. We'll continue third reading on Senate File 102. So stand at ease until 2:30, and the first order of business will be third reading, Senate File 102. And members, if you are interested in the redistricting, those maps are on the website, and I think they might have been emailed to you as well. So if you're interested and your community was one of those that might have changed, those maps should be there for you to review. And the Joint Conference Committee hopes to meet by, I hope we're out of here by 4:30 so we can meet with our Senate counterparts. So we'll stand at ease until 2:30. House will please come to order. We have some music going that probably needs to. It's my understanding the bill signings have been completed, unless somebody tells me differently. They are complete, so we're going to get underway with our business. Next bill for our consideration on third reading, Senate File 102.
Senate File 102, sponsored by Senator Hicks. Second Amendment Protection Act, an act relating to the regulation of firearms and the protection of constitutional rights, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Members, we have two amendments. The first is a delete the enacting clause. So we'll begin with third reading amendment number 2. Representative Larson, Dan.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I bring you,
Go ahead, just move the motion. Move the amendment, please.
you bet. I move House third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 102. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Hey, point of order, Mr. Speaker.
What's your point, Chairman Swanitzer?
Can we have a quick Rules Committee on the germaneness of this amendment?
All right, Rules Committee, assemble at the front. All right, so members of the public, we had a Rules Committee regarding there was a challenge to the germaneness, and then another point was brought up in the Rules Committee. I think the chairman believes that it likely is germane to the bill, but there is another rule, Mason's rule, that talks about the considering the same question in the same session. And upon the advice, and I agree with the Rules Committee, that this would be could end us considering the same bill, identical bill in the same session. Therefore, I'm going to rule it out of order. Representative Larson, please withdraw your amendment.
Mr. Speaker, I withdraw my amendment, but I object to your ruling and would like a roll call vote.
So members, there's been an objection to the ruling, and so if you vote aye, you're voting that we should proceed with this amendment. If you vote no, then you're voting that it is not appropriate to proceed with this amendment number 2 to the Senate File 102.
Mr. Speaker, point of order.
What's your point?
Is this debatable, the objection?
Do we really need to debate it? There's no seconds needed. You know what? If there's a few folks, we're going to do one time, or second reading rules, whatever. We'll go through it one time. Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am going to vote aye on this. I just really believe that we need to apply rules equally. And there's so many times where we consider things twice in this body. We've introduced bills just last session, and then the Senate takes them up. We stop considering it. They've been introduced because we don't have an introduction vote in the general session. And then when it comes back over, we consider it. So, I mean, to say that we don't consider things twice, we do it all the time. And the reality is that we really didn't consider it because it was on an introduction vote. So it's just like in the general session when you have a mere bill and that bill is introduced and referred to committee, which happened multiple times in the general session. It was a mere bill over in the Senate. They took it up. We didn't take it up again. And then we heard it when it came back over. And so we do this all the time. We really have to apply the rules equally. And so I'm going to vote aye just because I think we need to apply the rules equally. Thank you.
Representative Larson, Dan, on the objection.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. It was a great explanation. I agree. I think I'd encourage an aye vote on this. I think we should be able to bring this amendment forward. We heard it at introduction, but it was very, very brief. We should have a chance to explain it. Thank you.
Any other members? Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Any other discussion? All right, members. So this is a majority of the quorum to reject or overturn the ruling of the chair. It is, if you vote aye, you're voting to continue with the amendment, to overturn the objection or the ruling of the chair. If you vote no, you're voting that this amendment will not be considered. Are we clear? Aye, we continue with the amendment. No, it is not to be considered. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Connolly.
No.
Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Ayer. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer excused. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. LeBeau. McGuire. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn excused. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson,
Aye.
Winter, Yin, Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 12 aye, 46 no, 2 excused.
Or you voted not to sustain the objection. Next amendment for our consideration is third reading amendment number 1. Representative Fortner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate file number 102, and I will withdraw my amendment at the appropriate time. I'd like to start with the U.S. Constitution. I'd like to start with the Second Amendment, and I'd like to read it. I think everybody probably is more than familiar, but I'd like to read where I'm going with this. It says, a well-regulated militia being necessary to secure the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. To me, that means our founding fathers wasn't worried about us protecting ourselves against our neighbor. That, to me, means that the citizens of a state have the rights to defend themselves against the government. That's what that means. And if we don't put in place the best laws that we can put in place when we have the opportunity to do it, then not only are we letting ourselves down, we're letting the Constitution of this United States down. So, but anyways, I want to go back a little bit before I ever came and pick up from what I see it as, and I want to make it real clear, I'm not here to beat up on anybody in this body because that's not who I am. I want people to know the truth. I ran on truthful honesty and transparent when I ran for this office, and I think that's why they put me in. I based every decision off of that. So, but anyways, the SAPA bill that was ran in 2021 had a lot of teeth in it. And law enforcement in the state of Wyoming, they believe that they ought to be able to be one notch above the citizens when it comes to security. We got a lobbying group. State law enforcement have the lobbying group that's fought every pro-gun bill for the last 20 years. That means open carry and concealed carry and everything in between. They fought it. And the reason being was they thought that the police officers and the sheriffs of this state, I would tell all the law enforcement, I guess I'm probably in trouble for naming them, but anyways, all the law enforcement should have an upper hand to control we the people. And I don't believe that. And I know most conservatives don't believe that either. That's why this issue is important to me, and it's split our group down the middle, let's just say that. But anyways, I would like to say that the Senate file 102 is weak at best, in my opinion. And the reason I say that is because I got a letter from our law enforcement group at home, and the bill that the SAPA ran in 2001, they complained, and they sent me this letter in January asking me to vote against SAPA. And one of the reasons being is because SAPA bills have too many teeth to it, and it strips them of their protections, but they don't worry about our protections. And I think that's where we need to be at with this whole conversation is, do we want a bill that's not got teeth in it to strip out the protections of government and put us first, or do we want a weak bill that does nothing to protect us? That's where I'm at with it. I'm going to step back and yield for a minute and let these other guys talk. Thank you.
Any other member first time? First time on the amendment, first time. Representative Larson, Dan.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I'm for the amendment, against the bill. I think the bill is just weak, and it scares me with what may happen. I do want to quote also another a letter that came in January, and it's coming from some law enforcement, and it says, "Our employees know the power law enforcement wields when it comes to temporarily restricting constitutional rights, and it is only done at the last resort." And maybe I should read that again. Our employees know the power law enforcement wields when it comes to temporarily restricting constitutional rights, and it is only done at the last resort. That's scary. In this bill, your local attorney is the only one that can press charges against the law enforcement. And they are not going to press charges or bring a suit against the people they work with every day. It just will not happen. So I urge a aye vote on the amendment and a no on the bill.
Thank you. Any other members first time? First time. Representative Bear on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment and for the bill, some characterizations have been made of the people who lead the law enforcement in my county, and I just want to stand on behalf of them and say that, you know, they do care about our rights. They protect them every single day. I think it's a mischaracterization to say that they feel like they're above us. They are servants. Are there bad apples? Absolutely. We need to be careful that we don't become like the crowd that wants to defund the police. And that's what this sounds like. When I hear that this current bill that we're discussing has no teeth, and yet it will send one of these gentlemen we're talking about to jail for a year, I have to humbly disagree. This bill does have teeth. Does it have the same kind of teeth that the 2021 bill had? No, it's very different. But we continue seeing the bill that was presented in 2021 fail. And I, for one, would like my constituents to have something rather than nothing. When we say that it's a weak bill, but we're willing to go with no protection at all, which is weaker, I would say that no bill at all is weaker. And I really do believe that our law enforcement leaders who are elected by us have to be people that we can trust. And if we can't trust them, then we need to do something about that at the polls. To say that they will never defend the public, why do we even have them if they're not going to defend us? They do every day. Are there bad apples out there? I'm sure there are. But we're a pretty small community here in Wyoming. And if we fail to weed out the bad apples in this community, there's no hope. We have an opportunity here to do something that protects our citizens, that our law enforcement is actually in favor of. They're willing to put their jobs on the line. If they break the law, they know they're going to go to jail for a year and pay a fine. I think that's pretty reasonable. Against the amendment and for the bill.
Thank you, members. Representative Wharf, sorry, behind the screen here. Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too rise in support of this amendment and in opposition to the bill. I spoke rather strongly against this bill last time, or on first introduction, and I am going to say it again. This is a weak bill. Don't be fooled, because it purports to do things that it will not do. Yeah, there's teeth, and there are times when it says people are going to go to jail, they'll be punished. But what it doesn't do is it does not provide the mechanism for the citizens that we all represent to be protected against abuses of power. And that's what is so troubling about the letter that was read. Our constitutional rights, if you believe they're inalienable, they came from a God or a supreme being, they didn't come from the law enforcement. They didn't come from government. And I can tell you what Senate File 102 does. Senate File 102 basically says one branch of government is going to hold the other branch accountable. And I can tell you that that fails every time. I know of 2 instances, one in my county and one happens to be in Sheridan County, where there were incidents where the individuals went to their local county attorney and asked for assistance. And in both instances, they were told, I can't help you. I have to work with those guys. I can't bring charges against them. That is the reality. That's what Senate File 102 does. It does not protect people should law enforcement choose to impose an executive order that comes down from on high. Now, I don't know about any of you guys, but I believe I was elected to represent citizens in my community. They don't want a king to rule over them. That's what we're here for. We all took and swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States and of Wyoming. And I honestly believe, based on what is said by one of our duly elected sheriffs, it is very troubling to think that law enforcement thinks that they have the wisdom to know when it's appropriate to set aside our constitutional rights and when it's not. And I can tell you, if we pass this bill, if we pass Senate File 102, which we are very much on the verge of doing, that sets a law on our books that does nothing that it purports to do. And I'm just telling you, I've been an advocate. I've fought for gun rights for over a decade. And I can tell you, this is very troubling. This is the first time I've ever seen 2 opposing gun rights organizations on a gun issue. And it's very troubling to me. This is fracturing the gun community. And I can tell you, it's based on a false premise. The people that are pushing Senate File 102 have never been here. They've never worked with me on any bill that I ever worked on in this chamber or in this state. And I really urge the body's resistance. I do think you need to understand what this bill does. Don't buy into the fact that it does anything. Once it's on the books, it's going to be so much harder for us to go back and create it. And I know when we fought hard to get constitutional right to carry, we were told many years, oh, it'll never pass. You can never do it. We were told blood would run in the streets when we passed that. And I don't know about you, but I don't remember seeing any blood in the streets when we passed that bill. And I really urge the body's resistance. I can tell you good legislation is not easy to pass. You voted down Senate File 83. We didn't, they did. House Bill 133, you refused to hear on introduction. We tried to bring it in the form of an amendment so we could tell this body the difference. Didn't want to hear it. It's against the rules. I'm just telling you, don't pass weak legislation that your constituents are going to have to live with until somebody has the audacity to either be sued, go to prison, or come back crying and saying that law did not do what you said it would. I urge you to resist, vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. The members, I know there's a lot of interest in this and a lot of passions. And thank you for continuing to be civil. Representative Jennings, first time on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I have a lot of respect for the people in opposition to this. It's been a long, hard, and arduous place. I think there's a couple of things that I want to address. Those people out there that put their lives on the line for us at times, they raised their hand to the same Constitution you did. And don't take that lightly. Are there bad apples out there? Probably. I'd hope that everybody has the interest in weeding out the bad apples. But think about what's being said here in this amendment so far. I've waited. Maybe really what they're saying is that the constituency out there has elected 23 bad sheriffs or bad law enforcement people. I've waited for one of them to come back, or 2 or 3, and say, hey, look, you guys, this is a problem. I've not received one. I hope that all of you have reached out to your law enforcement in your community. Surely the citizens of Wyoming have not chosen to elect an entire group of people to be bad apples. If they have, if they're right in making this point, we're all in trouble. We're in very, very serious trouble. I, for one, can't go down that road that far. I'm with you guys 100% for the bad apples. I'll stand there with you and help pick that out. But I just have more faith in the citizens of Wyoming that they chose those law enforcement people wisely. I have faith. I mean, an informed citizenry is what we want. And what we're saying here in this is that we didn't do that. And I just disagree with that. I think our citizens, given the information, will make wise decisions. One of the main things that's also been purported here is there's no teeth. Well, there is. This will be the hardest on the criminal side just about in the nation of the states that have done that. It's up to a year in jail. If you're law enforcement, I can't help but think that you would not be looking forward to that, on top of the fact that it ended your career. Secondly, it's been brought out that there's not a civil. It's true, it's not spelled out in this bill. I think you'll find it spelled out in other places in statute, very much so, that once someone steps outside the color of law, they certainly have the opportunity to be sued by citizens. The civil penalty, now you can say, well, the judge is never going to hear it, or on the criminal, you can say, well, the county attorney's never going to prosecute their own. Well, it's in their interest. Don't we have different branches of government that all the time they're upholding their obligation of their oath of office? They answer to the electorate. And the civil part, if you're wronged, not too long ago, I think we debated, Mr. Speaker, a bill on asset forfeiture. And there was civil aspects of that, and I won't get into the legal part because I'm clearly not a lawyer. But there are remedies. It's Fourth Amendment. You don't get to give away your Fourth Amendment rights without the opportunity for redress. So just because it's not addressed in this bill, I don't see that does away with the citizen's right for redress. Maybe that's a debate for another day, another time. But I would ask that you defeat this amendment, vote aye on the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any other member, first time? First time? First time. First time, I'm sorry, thank you. Chairman Wilson, I was getting my screen up. Chairman Wilson, first time on the amendment, on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know I'm not usually up on these sort of bills. You didn't think to look over for me. So folks, I'm going to actually come at my vote on this from a totally different direction. I'm not part of the, gun drafting crowds. I've never sponsored a gun bill, although I have plenty of guns and shoot them, but that's just not my wheelhouse. And what I'm thinking isn't really part of the discussion so far. But one of the things is, I was asked about this Senate file that we aren't considering some time ago, and I told the person, I don't ever bother reading bills from the other end of the house until they show up at my desk, because things change. I don't pay any attention to them until they show up in front of me. So I am not voting on the bill that's before us based on what was in some other bill from the other end of the building that I didn't read and isn't before me. So I'm not voting on this one based on whether it's more or less great than the one that no longer exists. And so being a gun owner, but also being a person who has a lot of friends and family members in law enforcement, I'll tell you the reason I'm going to vote against this bill and it's a totally different reason than what has been brought forward, but because frankly, I don't like the potential of a year imprisonment. I just, even if you think a person is dead wrong, maybe they should quit their job if they think their supervisor is acting unconstitutionally, okay? But I'm just personally not willing to add jail time to our civil servants. I know we're hostile about all kind of folks, health orders and law enforcement and all sorts of other things, but that's why I actually, if there were a civil penalty, I would be okay with that because the person's agency can pay it and that'll teach them to not do things we don't like. But I'm just not willing to take employees and throw them in jail for following the instructions of their supervisor. And I know that's kind of thinking in a totally different direction than what we've heard, but that's my thinking. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Knapp, first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Well, this is one issue I never thought I'd want to be packing before I got up to the podium. But since it was my sheriff that has been quoted several times, and the police chief, I just wanted to finish the quote, where they say, "Time and time again, we encounter law-abiding citizens exercising their right to keep and bear arms. Only when a credible threat or actual violence occurs do we intervene, and will always be by the least intrusive means possible. We can provide examples where citizens resorted to deadly force to protect themselves or their family, and our staff made no arrests." So I would speak in favor of this bill. I'm pro-gun. I carry a concealed. And I had to look at this in a objective manner. I actually voted for the last introduction of the previous bill. However, when I look at a bill, I decide what it's going to do to protect me, my rights, my constitutional rights, and my family. So when I look at this bill, I would have to imagine that an officer would think twice because of the year in jail factor before coming into my home and confiscating my weapons based on a mandate from the federal government. And we do have branches hold each other accountable. We just saw that with the vaccine mandate. Went through the Supreme Court ruled that that was unconstitutional. And that's how our society works. That's how our system of government works. I have to assume that a district attorney, given a set of circumstances, would choose to prosecute somebody who violated constitutional rights. I would have to assume that. Just as I would have to assume on a civil case that a judge or a jury would rule in favor of somebody's constitutional rights. The system works both ways, and I think one representative spoke very well about this. It's a decision between civil and criminal. And for me, I would rather have somebody face that criminal aspect of being put in jail for a year for violating rights than they would have to come up with the money to go to court to sue them, which may last 1 year, may last 2 years, and I may not get the result I want. Would I like both together? Absolutely, and nothing precludes us from suing in this bill, still. But it does add that criminal element that I think is important. So I realize that somehow there's two sides to this when both want the same result. But for me, I would say vote your conscience.
Thank you. Representative Washut on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hesitated to come up to the mic, but a few things I want to say. Number one, the law enforcement officers who I know in this state, and I know a great many of them, are among the most ardent Second Amendment supporters out there. They believe in this amendment. They believe in the Constitution. And I think the real purpose of a SAPA law is to give our state and local law enforcement people a tangible document for them to further resist any suggestion from Washington, D.C. that they should or must pursue an unconstitutional objective. It's not because they are driving around in your neighborhoods right now wishing they could kick in your door and seize your rifles and handguns. Because if an unconstitutional order comes down from Washington, D.C., and you know, you're picturing somebody coming to your home to seize your weapons, right? Those officers don't want to be that guy on your front porch because they know how nasty that's going to be in a state like Wyoming. They don't want to try and seize your weapons. But do they want to take a weapon away from a drug addict or a convicted burglar who's prowling your neighborhood at 3 o'clock in the morning? Absolutely they do. And that's the difference between enforcing the law to the protection of everybody while still respecting the Constitution. And in terms of teeth, if you have public officials violating their oath of office under color of law, violating your civil rights, they can be sued. They can be sued already without any further statutory changes by this body. They can be sued. In fact, if we look at the fairly recent Supreme Court ruling that finally clarified in great legal writing by the late Justice, where he said this is an individual right. Remember, before that ruling, there was some dispute about a well-regulated militia and whether this was an individual right. And in that case decision, the court said it's an individual right. They got it right. And law enforcement officers believe that as much as anybody in this room believes that. That decision was the result of one of these lawsuits where citizens claimed government was infringing upon their constitutional rights with regard to the Second Amendment. And the case was litigated in the courts. And it took place before SAPA laws became a thing. So there are mechanisms in the law today already that allow citizens who have their rights violated by public officials to seek redress through the courts. But I just want, you know, I have so many friends who serve every day, you know, who take great risks. You know, my neighbor and former student who was honored at the State of the State address a couple years ago after being shot multiple times, serving his community. These officers believe in the Constitution and in the duties that they are sworn to protect every bit as much as we do. And I just can't speak well enough of the character of those people. And when we look at the national news, do we see prosecutors prosecuting police officers? Right? All over this country, we see cases where police officers who've gone too far, who've violated rights, are being prosecuted in our courts today. So to suggest that a prosecutor who's also elected by the citizenry would never, ever prosecute a law enforcement officer is patently false. You know, I've seen officers in my community prosecuted. When they violate the law, the prosecutors have taken an oath. And so to suggest that our prosecutors would never prosecute a police officer suggests that, one, our police officers don't take their constitutional responsibility seriously, and that our prosecutors don't take their responsibility seriously. I remember talking about this bill with my son, and he said, you know, Dad, if you got voted out of office because you weren't strong enough on the Second Amendment, that would be the greatest irony in Wyoming political history. I've said my piece.
Thank you. Any other member first time? First time. First time, second time. Second time. Representative Jennings, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to make one little clarification, then I'll try not to take you guys' time. One of the good speakers from this town talked about the penalty and not wanting to put the penalty on. When that actually occurred, that the officers are already subject to that. Actually, in drafting of this bill, it was gone into other statute that they are already subject to. So, and that was done with that purpose, not wanting to put something new on our law enforcement. So hope that clarifies a little bit. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We're on second time. Representative Worf.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the things I think is important for this body to understand, there is this thing called governmental immunity, which basically states that if they're acting in accordance with their directive, they are immune from prosecution. That's what I am talking about. If an order is given and a sheriff signs a contract with the federal government to put together a task force and they decide they are going to come door to door and pick up whatever it is. I mean, we just had a very popular president that with the stroke of a pen outlawed bump stocks, okay? We have a current administration that is going after pistol-braced ARs. There are orders that are already in the chain that are coming down. And I can tell you that this body needs to understand that in the event that happens, if any of our law enforcement, now we've talked about sheriffs, we talked about police chiefs, there's all kinds of law enforcement. We got a thing called DCI. All these different branches of government are protected. They have immunity. They have immunity, folks, if they are acting under the cover of the law. That's what we are talking about. Senate File 102 does not stop that from happening. And the reality is, yes, there has been incidents when we've had attorneys that have gone after law enforcement guys that have been committed very egregious acts. But I can tell you, I know of a cattle theft incident over $250,000, and the individual that tried to get action by his county attorney was told, I can't help you because I have to work with those guys. I happen to have a very good friend that had an accident driving on an interstate. He had a semi hit him, left the scene. He had a highway patrolman that responded to the trucker that hit him. He had a sheriff that went to him where the accident was. They ended up filing a false police report. He could get no action from our county attorney to help him address that problem. And I can tell you, it is real. It is real. They said, it was mentioned, did you talk to your law enforcement? I'm going to say, did you talk to your county attorneys? Did any of you ask your county attorney, would you have the ability to bring charges against a sheriff or any law enforcement person that decides to execute an order that has come down from on high? And I can tell you, I fervently believe that our founding fathers, when they put together the Constitution, they never would have ever considered giving the king as much power as the king has today. And I think it is on us. It's up to us to decide. Do we want to relegate the people that have elected us to represent them? Do we want to let them roll the dice and see if they can run that gauntlet? Are they willing to be the ones that are put on the chopping block? Because that's what we're doing. If we pass Senate File 102, we are affording the sentiment. We are sending the message that we are protecting the Second Amendment rights of the people that live in our districts. And I'm telling you that that's patently false. Please vote this down. Thank you.
We're on second time, second time, second time. Any other members second time? To the sponsor, Representative Fortner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to remind everybody of last week, the discussions we went through about federal dollars and the strings attached. Then I'd also like to remind everybody last week, 2 senators showing up right here and right in the House, warning us against federal dollars with strings attached. State law enforcement lobbying group has been to Washington DC since the war on drugs started, and they've been spreading dollars across Wyoming every year. Those have strings attached. Now, it might be a few years before we see what the strings are. It might be 10 years. We don't know. But I believe 102 should be strengthened, to say the least. It's got a lot of improvement for it. I don't think it guards against what's coming, by no means. And I would just encourage everybody to stand strong, vote no on 102, and shoot for a better bill next year, because there's better bills that's going to come. But it'll be just like we was in the special session with mandates. Once you pass a bill to deal with the issue, we'll never get a second shot at it, because they'll always say, well, you know what, we already got a bill on the books. What are we doing wasting our time? So anyways, with that said, I'd like to withdraw my amendment and ask you to vote no on 102 in hopes that we can draft a better one next year. I'd also like to quote a president, what he said about bills, good bills and bad bills. It said, a great president once said, it's better to kill a bad bill than to pass a good bill. And I stand on that. Thank you.
All right, members, thank you for withdrawing the motion. Thank you for the debate, members. Senate File 102, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Connolly.
No.
Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Ayer. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer excused. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. LeBeau. McGuire. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn excused. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Romero Martinez. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson.
No.
Winter. Yin. Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 43 aye, 15 no, 2 excused.
Senate File 102, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 102 has passed the House. All right, members, we're going to sign some enrolled acts, kind of clear off the desk a little bit, and then we're going to do joint conference committee reports on House Bill 3, House Bill 3 and Senate File 35. So, Chairman, if you'll be queued up to give your joint conference committee reports as soon as we're done signing bills. So, again, a dull roar while we take care of this business. Those joint conference committees reports have been emailed to you by Chief Clerk Harding, one at 9 o'clock, approximately 9 o'clock, and one at 11 o'clock. So check your email for Chief Harding. Members, with that order of business of signing of enrolled acts. First is Enrolled Act 29.
Senate Enrolled Act 29 being original Senate File 27. An act relating to counties, authorizing the Board of county commissioners to dissolve county-created boards as specified, specifying requirements for dissolution, amending the duties of county commissioners, making conforming amendments, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 29, being original Senate File 27. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act 30.
Senate Enrolled Act 30, being original Senate File 38, an act relating to ad valorem taxation of mineral production, clarifying and modifying the reporting and payment of ad valorem taxes on mineral production, clarifying and modifying provisions for the payment of deferred taxes, providing an appropriation, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 30, being original Senate File 38. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act 31.
Senate Enrolled Act 31, being original Senate File 77, an act relating to petitions for name changes, amending residency requirement to petition for a name change, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 31, being original Senate File 77. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act 32.
Senate Enrolled Act 32, being original Senate File 73, an act relating to public funds, codifying the institutional land revenue fund, directing expenditures from the fund, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 32, being original Senate File 73. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act 33.
Senate Enrolled Act 33, being original Senate File 53, an act relating to the local government insurance program, clarifying program payment limits related to healthcare provider liability, correcting an incorrect citation, specifying applicability, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 33, being original Senate File 53. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act
Senate Enrolled Act
34.
34, being original Senate File 43, an act relating to community college district elections, amending the date of the first regular election of a community college district board, providing for the terms of members, clarifying provisions for the conduct of community college district elections, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 34, being original Senate File 43. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act 35.
Senate Enrolled Act 35, being original Senate File 3, an act relating to commercial vehicle fees, providing for a single emergency response fee for the transportation of radioactive materials, increasing the fee, specifying the proper deposit of the fee, striking a duplicate fee and duplicative language, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 35, being original Senate File 3. I have so signed. All right, members, with that order of business and consideration of joint conference committee reports, the first conference committee report is on House Bill 3. Chairman Eklund.
Mr. Speaker, I move first joint conference committee report to House Bill 3 and would ask for your aye vote and favorable consideration. We came to a compromise, and I'll let my colleague from the land of the buffaloes explain it.
Representative Crago, on the conference committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So if you all have a chance to look at the conference committee report, essentially what it did when the bill left our end of the hall, we had taken out the ability to give the land board discretion, essentially, whether or not to provide a preference to people seeking to apply for one of these vacant land parcels. When it went to the other end, our colleagues down the hall put in an absolute preference or absolute discretion, and we kind of reached something in the middle, which requires a hearing and requires them to have good cause, and it provides a procedure for challenging that determination by the board. And so it's a good middle spot, and I would ask for your aye vote on the conference committee report.
Discussion on the conference committee report. Discussion on the conference committee report. Discussion. Seeing none, members, we are voting on conference committee number 1, joint conference committee number 1, report to House Bill 3. Majority of elected members are required. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly.
Aye.
Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Ayer, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer excused, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn excused, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson,
Aye.
Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Larson Dan, aye to no. Further changes? Fortner, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 56 aye, 2 no, 2 excused.
By your vote, you've adopted Joint Conference Committee number 1 report on House Bill 3. Next is Joint Conference on Senate File 35. Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move Joint Conference Committee number 1 report on Senate File 35, message 195. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you remember, excuse me, this is the bill that in effect says that electric vehicle charging stations are not public utilities. And that's the gist of the bill. When it was here, we added amendment to further go on and try to explain what that means. That amendment was actually considered in the Senate and at one point added in, another point removed, as being just duplication of information already in statute. So in talking with our counterparts down the hall, we agreed with them that it really was nothing more than duplication. It is a little confusing and no sense adding wording where it's not needed. And so we agreed to delete the House amendment. And that's it in a nutshell. And I would ask for your aye vote.
Discussion on the Joint Conference Committee number 1, Senate File 35. Discussion. Members, we are voting on Joint Conference Committee number 1, report to Senate File 35. Majority of the elected members required. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly.
Aye.
Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Ayer, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer excused, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn excused, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson,
Aye.
Winter, Yin. Conflict? Sawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 57 aye, 2 excused, 1 conflict.
By your vote, you voted to adopt Joint Conference Committee Number 1 report on Senate File 35. So members, looking at the list, it looks like we have a couple conference committees still out. As you know, House Bill 100, Joint Conference Number 1, still continues to work on redistricting. House Bill 42, local government distributions, work is ongoing there. Senate File 40, I think they did announce they were meeting at some point, so that we'll get a reminder on that. And then we're still, there's a few things waiting concurrence. So members, that actually clears the desk for the day, third reading, all the Joint Conference Committee reports, all the concurrences that we have available to us. We had a little bit of idle time waiting for bill signings. We do appreciate the governor doing that. That's quite nice that he's able to do that. And I don't know if folks got an invitation, but I was reminded by our Secretary of State's office, elections folks, that tonight at, I think it's 4:30. Where's Chairman Zwanitzer at? Chairman Zwanitzer, do you know the time of the demonstration of the voting machines and that the Secretary of State is putting forth? Representative Walters, would you just announce that to the body, please? So you got this announcement. Representative Walters, would you just announce that to the body?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This announcement was in all of your mailboxes. Simply reading from the invitation on behalf of the Speaker. And this comes from the Secretary of State on 3-9 and 3-10, both days at 4:30 or upon adjournment in the auditorium downstairs. There will be a presentation on election integrity and security. Again, that's today and tomorrow, 4:30 p.m. or upon adjournment, election integrity and security as presented by the Secretary of State.
Thank you very much, Representative Walters. So the Secretary of State certainly has an interest in this. We've been talking a lot about election law during this budget session even. So if you have interest in that topic and seeing what both the technology is and some of the things in place that our clerks do and our Secretary of State's responsible for, please go down to the auditorium on the north end of the connector and participate and learn about what's occurring. So, Mr. Majority Floor Leader, that clears the desk.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House adjourn until 10 a.m. tomorrow, the 10th day of March, 2022.
Committee announcements. Committee announcements. House Bill 100 will attempt to convene about between 4 and 4:30 to continue considering House Bill 1, conference on House Bill 100, excuse me, 100. Any other announcements? You've heard the motion. All those in favor of adjourning until 10 a.m., which the 10 a.m. Thursday, March 10th, which will be our 19th day of the budget session for the 66 Wyoming Legislature. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. We are adjourned.
Mr. Speaker, just want to re-announce, sorry,
After the fact, Chairman Nichols.
after the fact, that your joint appropriations will meet at noon to